Most of us think about reputation as something that just kind of happens, right? A passive reflection of who we are. But when it comes to the high stakes game of power, thinking that way is a huge mistake. See, your reputation isn't just a reflection of you, it's the very ground you build your power on. And look, this isn't some subtle piece of advice. It's putting it in the bluntest terms possible. This isn't about being popular, it's about survival. In any competitive field, your reputation is everything. It's your armor, it's your weapon, it's your calling card, all rolled into one. So that's the big question, isn't it? How can this one thing, this idea people have of you, be both a shield and a sword? Well, we're going to break it down, and we've got some absolutely incredible stories from history to show you how. All right, first up, the shield. We're talking about reputation as a defense so strong it can literally stop an army dead in its tracks without a single shot fired. Okay, so picture this. We're in ancient China, right in the middle of the chaotic Three Kingdoms period. There's this brilliant general, Chuko Liang, and he's in a really, really bad spot. He's just sent his main army off on another mission, leaving him basically defenseless in this tiny, walled town. And just when you think it can't get any worse, it does. It goes from bad to completely impossible. Because an enemy army, led by his arch-rival Sima Yi, suddenly shows up on the horizon. I mean, just look at these numbers. Liang has 100 guys. Sima Yi has 150,000. This isn't a battle, it's a slaughter waiting to happen. There's just no normal way out of this. But instead of panicking, Liang does something that looks, for all the world, like complete and utter madness. He tells his handful of soldiers to hide, he orders all the military flags taken down, and then he throws the city gates wide open. And to top it all off, he climbs up on the wall, sits down where the entire enemy army can see him, and just starts playing his lute. And the crazy thing? It worked! That massive army of 150,000 men just stops. They hesitate, and then they turn around and retreat. They run away. Sima Yi, who was no fool, was totally spooked. So the question is, why? What on earth did he see that made him give up a surefire victory? Here's the thing. He wasn't looking at a guy on a wall. He was looking at the sleeping dragon. Chuko Liang had spent years building this reputation for being a brilliant strategist, a master of deception who was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. And Sima Yi knew this. So when he saw those open gates, he didn't see surrender. He saw a trap. A blatant, almost insulting trap. Liang's reputation was his shield, and it was so powerful that it saved him and his men without a single person getting hurt. Incredible. Okay, so that's the shield. Now, let's flip the coin, because if a strong reputation is a shield, then a weak one, or having no reputation at all, well, that's a weak spot. And weak spots can be attacked. This is how reputation becomes a sword. And for this, we're turning to the master showman himself, P.T. Barnum. See, early on, Barnum was a nobody. He tried to buy this museum in Manhattan, but the owners pulled out of the deal at the very last second and sold it to the competition, the much more established Peale's Museum. And their reason was super simple. Peale's had a great reputation. Barnum had none. So Barnum, with absolutely nothing to lose, thinks, okay, if I can't build my own reputation, I'll just tear theirs down. And he was so methodical about it. He launched this brilliant 2-part attack. First up, doubt. He starts this letter-writing campaign in all the newspapers, planting seeds of doubt about Peale's finances, questioning if they can even run the museum properly. Now, this is a genius move for someone with no power, because it creates a trap. If Peale comes out and denies the rumors, they just look defensive and kind of guilty. But if they ignore them, people start to think, maybe it's true. Either way, they lose. So once he'd planted those seeds of doubt, Barnum moved on to his second weapon, ridicule. Peale's was putting on these very serious, quote-unquote, scientific shows about mesmerism. So what does Barnum do? He stages a complete parody right across the street. In his show, at the most dramatic moment, a little girl would supposedly wake up from her trance and just run off the stage screaming. The audience loved it. They were roaring with laughter. And pretty soon, nobody could take this serious show at Peale's seriously anymore. Barnum was building his own reputation as a clever, fun entertainer, all while tearing his rivals to shreds. Okay, so we've got 2 amazing stories, right? One, a reputation so strong it stops an army. 2, an attack so clever it destroys a business. But these aren't just cool historical anecdotes. They're basically blueprints. So let's pull out the key lessons from Chuko Liang's shield and P.T. Barnum's sword and turn them into a kind of modern playbook. All right, here's maybe the biggest lesson of all. The actual facts of what you do, they don't matter as much as you think. It's how people interpret what you do that counts. In your reputation, that's the lens they see everything through. Just think about this story of Mi Zuxia, a courtier back in ancient China. So when he was in the ruler's good graces, he did something illegal. He took the royal carriage without permission to rush home to his sick mother. The ruler heard about it, and because he loved Mi Zuxia, he saw it as this incredible act of devotion. Wow, he thought, he risked punishment for his mother. But fast forward a bit. Rivals had poisoned the well and ruined Mi Zuxia's reputation. And suddenly, the ruler remembers that same event completely differently. He even remembered a time Mi Zuxia gave him a half-eaten peach, which at the time seemed like a gesture of love. But now he saw it as a disgusting insult. It's the same person, doing the same things, but the interpretation is the complete opposite. The only thing that changed was his reputation. Okay, so how do you actually build a reputation from the ground up? The trick is to be strategic about it. Don't try to be good at everything for everyone. That just makes you forgettable. Instead, pick one single outstanding quality. Maybe you're the most efficient person in the room, or the most honest, or the most creative. Make that one thing known, let it spread, and it becomes your calling card. It does the hard work for you before you even walk into a room. All right, but what if your reputation is already in trouble? What do you do then? Well, the play here is to associate yourself with someone or something that has the exact opposite image. Think back to Barnum. He was known for kind of cheap, vulgar entertainment, so he sponsored a tour for Jenny Lind, an elegant, refined European opera singer. It instantly elevated his own status. Or think about the ruthless robber barons in the 19th century. To clean up their image, they started collecting priceless art. And now names like Morgan and Frick are associated with high culture, with Da Vinci and Rembrandt, not just with crushing their competition. And all of this really leads us to one final unavoidable point. You have to become the master of your own story. The philosopher Nietzsche put it perfectly. He said, "It is easier to cope with a bad conscience than with a bad reputation." And why is that? Well, a bad conscience is something you deal with on your own. It's internal. But a bad reputation, that's a public punishment. It changes how the entire world treats you, what doors open for you, and what kind of respect you get. And that brings us to maybe the most important takeaway of all. You can't opt out. You can't just say, you know what, I don't care about reputation. That's not how it works. Because if you aren't the one actively building and shaping your reputation, trust me, other people will do it for you. And they're probably not going to paint a very flattering picture. You'll be defined by their gossip, their envy, their stories. So it all comes down to a pretty simple question. Every single thing you do, every word you say, it's another sentence being written in the story of you. That story is being written every single day, whether you like it or not. The only real question is, are you the one holding the pen?